Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Pan Future Society podcast. It will be Saturday, October 8th. When you hear this, I'm actually recording this the day before. Last night, I had a great interview with a Transhumanist Party candidate for President, Zoltan Istvan, and that will be coming up as the main chunk of the show today. And let's get right to business. Here is your quick hit this week for news of the moment. In China, the largest single-dish radio telescope on Earth is being brought online. It is in China's Jiangsu province. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. My apologies. 1,200 miles southwest of Beijing. Known as FAST, the 500-meter aperture spherical telescope, is larger than Arecibo, which is well known. It's a very similar looking kind of dish. Arecibo is 300 meters, so the FAST dish is 500 meters. Designed this way, it can reach 70% farther into space, which could increase its number of potential targets by 4.6 times, as the numbers run down here. It also has some other advantages. It can see more of the sky, up to 40 degrees from its zenith. Arecibo can track objects for as long as 40 minutes. The FAST telescope will be able to track for as much as 6 hours. So that gives you a whole lot more data to crunch. And the Chinese government, as the Chinese often can do because they will just do things, the government is also relocating 9,000 people living nearby to keep the telescope free of man-made interference. For the first couple of years, they're going to be testing it and setting all their settings and twiddling their dials and doing all that. But after that, they expect to use it for research on galaxies, pulsars, and other astronomical objects. Foreign researchers will also have access, and they will also use it for SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. So it is the most sensitive in the world, with a frequency range of 70 megahertz to 3 gigahertz within the radio spectrum. So we have another very large tool on the way to use for research into space and possibly finding any signs of intelligent life that may have found their way to us. That is your news of the moment, and now on to the interview. All right, greetings everyone, and welcome to the interview on today's Pan Future Society podcast. I have with me the Transhumanist Party presidential candidate for 2016, Mr. Zoltan Istvan. Mr. Istvan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Great. So just to start out, I think the nature of my podcast, people have some idea of what transhumanism is. So I think we can skip past the basics, and I'd like to start by asking you why a presidential campaign was the vehicle that you chose to get your message out.
Sure. Well, transhumanism has been around for 30 or 40 years, but it's never had a political side to it. And, it was a movement that was growing, kind of going from science fiction to the realm of, nonfiction in a way, because all of a sudden these things we talked about 30 years ago, telepathy, brainwave headsets, exoskeleton suits, are now here and being used. So all of a sudden, transhumanism needed a kind of a lobbying faction and politicians and attorneys writing law and creating ethical ideas and stuff like that. So we formed the Transhumans Party to fill that sort of void that was in the movement, because it really just didn't have anything that was kind of standing up for the actual civil rights of transhumanists.
Mm-hmm. So it's sort of a way of getting into the mechanisms that certain things get done. I mean, the science and the research is all great, but really with the transhumanist ideas, we will be getting into areas of things like civil rights, which are, I guess, by their nature, a governmental function.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just the world is changing quite dramatically because of science and technology. And, there's very interesting things happening, like with virtual reality is if somebody's raped in an online environment in virtual reality, is that a crime? And, something like that actually happened in Australia, and the person went to the sheriff's office, and the sheriff said, well, we don't even know really how to deal with this. We've never heard of it. So this is where the Transhumanist Party can kind of step in and say, well, we think this or we think that. And the same thing with just ideas on personhood of artificial intelligence, or the idea whether we should be teaching robots religion or not. There's all these different types of ideas out there, and having a political arm is a good way to get into the mechanism of society and say, well, it's not just a social movement, it's also a movement that really is, here to kind of help America understand itself better and move America forward, as well as, any other country in the world, move the entire world forward.
Yeah. That's something I've mentioned on my show before. We're sort of racing ahead with the technological development and sort of the social development, which seems to be human nature in a way, is lagging behind.
Oh, there's no question that, just think of even the 2016 elections. You have Trump and Clinton who won't even touch some of the most pressing technological concerns. I'm amazed that Hillary, as a woman, wouldn't address the subject of designer babies, even though we officially now can do eye color, with genetic editing and stuff like that, or we can do hair color, and we can also very probably in the next few years do some type of brain augmentation where we're improving IQ levels. That's what China is working on. You would think that this is not only a national security issue, but just a very important national identity issue. And you would have presidential candidates talking about it. But it's exactly why the Transhumanist Party is so needed, is because the main politicians can't actually address the stuff because it's really controversial. Imagine if Hillary Clinton just at the debate started talking about designer babies, she might freak out everyone. And yet, because I'm not an unknown candidate, but certainly I have no real chance of winning, absolutely zero, and have really very little chance of even affecting the outcome of the election. I can say what I want, and so we kind of go out there and say the truth, but the truth is always 5 to 10 years ahead, and we're hoping that some of the lawmakers, some of the other politicians, and maybe even the main presidential candidates hear our message and start thinking about it. And if that happened, then that would be really good. Because otherwise, we're going to end up with, one day reading on CNN that, Chinese now have 20% higher IQ than us, because America was too scared to talk about this conversation. Now there's an entire new generation of Chinese babies that are going to be definitely smarter than us, and that's an issue. Yeah,
we shouldn't kid ourselves either to think that other countries won't do this. They're going to. People are going to do it. So we need to know what we're getting into, right?
No, and of course they're going to do it because it's advantageous for their society. America is quite conservative when you actually look at it. 75% of the country is religious. 75% of the country believes in a deity that's going to offer them an afterlife. So they're not interested in modifying their brains. They're not interested in changing their lives because they have an eternity afterwards to kind of enjoy or in their perspective, be with God once they've died. Where, China is mostly a secular nation. It's basically Buddhist. They're not necessarily thinking of afterlife. They want to make the most of this life. And so when you have parents that go off and, they go to the hospital, they're like, well, yes, make my child a super child. That's exactly what I want. So America has to kind of come to terms with its conservatism and kind of say, whether we like it or not, we better break out of these chains, and just so we can remain competitive moving forward in the next half century.
Yeah, and I hope people do continue to become more comfortable with that idea. We've always pushed ourselves. We see great athletes honing their skills. It shouldn't be too much of a stretch to think that of an actual robotic bionic modification to increase that ability or something like that.
Yeah, no. I mean, and I think it's okay to accept that. I mean, for example, if you go to India and you talk about putting on a robotic arm, it's much more accepted in India because everyone there, and just because of their cultural background, they're Hindus, and the Hindu religion has like 42,000 gods. So certainly there's like some god who has all sorts of weird genetic or bionic arm or something like that. Maybe it's not a bionic arm, but the point is that their mindset, their value system is able to adapt to this idea that upgrading the human being is totally normal or totally acceptable. Yeah. Whereas Americans are like, no way, we cannot put on a robotic arm because that's unnatural. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what is natural? Well, most transhumanists don't believe in this concept of natural. Natural is not a primate picking up a rock and making an axe out of it 100 or 200,000 years ago or a million years ago, whatever it is. The idea here is that we can become a super species, eliminate suffering, eliminate hopefully death, making sure our family members can live so that we don't have to watch our children die from leukemia. We can do all that through transhumanist technology, but it's going to become, it's going to be a brave new world in a way where we really are harnessing evolution and taking it in our own hands. And for some people, that's mighty scary, and for others like myself, I think that's completely the not only the most appropriate way to go, but certainly the best way that I want to raise my children in a world where they can, not have to worry about death or extreme suffering or tragedy and some of the other things. Transhumanists want to eliminate all that through science and technology.
Yeah, that's great. So among the other things on the party platform that is posted online, and I will link to all that in the show notes for people, something that's very interesting to me personally are the ideas of technological unemployment and the growing use of robots and AI and computers. And one of your items in the platform is to work toward a universal basic income. So give me a sense of how that would work. And this is an issue that I think people aren't paying attention to enough, how we've always lost jobs and gained jobs, and politicians always say that they will create jobs. But we're entering an era where the jobs will go away and they won't come back because we simply don't have to do them anymore. And that's maybe one of the most disruptive things on the horizon. So give me a sense of where transhumanism comes in and can give us the tools to deal with that situation.
Sure. Well, I 100% agree with you that we're entering an era. It's literally happening now, but definitely you're going to see it much more pronounced in the next 5 or 10 years, where the jobs that are lost due to automation or AI or robots, they're not coming back. They're not coming back ever. And I don't know about ever, but the idea is if robots are going to continue to develop and take more and more jobs. My wife is an OBGYN, and they said, you have to be prepared that in 15 or 20 years, a robot will be able to deliver a baby better than you and do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and have no liability whatsoever. Yeah. In terms of the robot can't sue the hospital or whatever. It's a complete free lunch in a way from an economic perspective. Everyone's of course going to go for the robots and go for automation because it's just simply from a capitalist perspective, it's a better thing to do. I think because of this, capitalism will probably not survive beyond 15 or 20 or 25 years because too many jobs are going to be lost. And when you start dealing with 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% unemployment, you can't just put everyone on welfare. That just doesn't work that way. So we at the Transhumanist Party, support a universal basic income where everybody gets a minimum amount of money every month. It's a living amount of money. You can have a roof over your head, food, and the basics, and you don't have to do a thing. And it's not just for the poor people. It's not just for anyone. It's for the rich too. Everybody gets it. And the idea is that it's a very fair system. You enter this world full of wonderful natural resources. Well, those natural resources belong to the people. And, so the million-dollar question, of course, is, everyone likes the idea of universal basic income, whether you're poor or rich. It doesn't make a difference. The real question is, how do we pay for that? And that's a much more difficult, predicament. I have suggested a kind of a couple different ways. First off, I think if a company is replacing jobs, then they have to be replacing jobs forever. Then they really need to be responsible to some extent to that. So if Google's making machines that literally replace, let's just say, restaurant workers or cooks, well, at some point Google has to pick up that tab. It can't just become a bigger and bigger and bigger company while 15% of the workforce goes unemployed forever.
Right.
So at some point, even though I tend to lean as be a left libertarian person, I realize it's not just taxes either. It may have to be some kind of national dividend or something of that nature that these companies have to pay. I think the other thing to understand is that we're, half of America, well, not half of America, but half of the Western 11 Western states are basically owned by government. And we're talking major parts of California, major parts of Colorado and Arizona and, Oregon and Nevada. And we have huge resources. We're talking forests and lumber and minerals and oil and copper, everything like that. We're sitting on trillions and trillions of dollars, enough to pay for a universal basic income, to help pay for it for a long, long time. And I can assure you that in 20 or 30 or 40 years, I don't know if the human species is going to be around in the same way. I don't know if we're going to necessarily need food because, eating and pooing and drinking and all these other things, these are not systems that the transhumanist plans to keep over a 100-year lifespan. We're going to get rid of our inner organs. We're going to get rid of those kind of things. The biology is frail. Most transhumanists think that. They're like, what a stupid system to create a human being where you must be reliant on oxygen. You need to breathe air to survive. These are systems that over time, over the next 20, 30, 40 years, transhumanists are going to aim to use technology to get rid of. And this idea of what it's going to need to live will be quite different as well. But either way, the government's holding on to trillions of dollars of natural resources. We should start using some of those natural resources to pay for universal basic income. In fact, it's a little bit astonishing to me that we have about 10 or 15% of America is super poor, some children going to bed hungry at night, and that we aren't selling off pieces of these natural resources to take care of those Americans. But those are the two different ways that I would look forward to, trying to implement a universal basic income. And it's not something that would happen overnight. It's something that would take 5, 10 years. But the idea is, if we don't do it, what's going to happen? Well, those workers that lose their jobs are going to revolt. I was on a campaign trail. There's a bunch of truck drivers, on across America as we took our bus trip. And these are grown men. Many of them carry guns. They're not going to say, oh, a robot is now driving my truck and I'm going to go home and whine about it. These are men that are going to revolt. I mean, there's 4 million of these men in America. This is one of the biggest jobs. So you can't tell them you're going to go on welfare for the rest of your life. They're not going to accept it. So we need to come up with a solution that keeps all the workers happy when they don't have to work and convince them that all this free time is something that they actually are going to enjoy. So it's a complicated dance, but we at the Transhumanist Party support maneuvering and making that big giant transition.
Yeah, that was not too long ago. I just out of curiosity, I looked up. There's something like 30 or 35,000 taxi drivers in New York City. What if every single one of those is a self-driving car? What are those? That's not something you can just retrain people for different jobs.
And it's the same thing with the truck drivers. These are not people. Most of these truck drivers have been truck drivers for 20, 30 years. There's no retraining them. And even in the 4 or 5 years it would take to retrain them, robots in that time would have caught up to whatever job we retrained them. We don't have a choice here. Like I don't support a universal basic income because I'm a nice guy. It's not like that at all. I support a universal basic income because I don't want people breaking down my door and shooting me because there's revolution in the air. I support it because we want science and technology to move forward, and we want the world to move forward, and we want peace. And you can't ask 4 million truck drivers who have guns for peace when they have lost their job to some machine. They're just not going to accept it. And I think that's very, very important to understand, is that in order to keep society safe and keep society, progressing forward, we need to make sure people are happy. We're not doing it because we like to be, that nice altruistic Santa Claus. We're doing it because it's in the best interest of the nation as a whole to keep everyone healthy, to keep everyone fed, to keep everyone with a good roof over their head. That's the reason we do it. We do it for national security.
And, ideally, we can make this transition so those people who no longer have jobs, frankly, don't need them and can pursue their passions, spend time with their families, go read a book. Yeah.
No, and this is, when you talk about my universal basic income plan, especially at the party, there's a whole bunch of other things too. We support entirely free education, and that goes to 5 PhDs if you want it. We think that, what we can create is a society that instead of trying to retrain people for jobs, retrain them for culture, for enjoying themselves. We know one thing for sure, just based on statistics, that a well-educated society is happier, more prosperous, and certainly is involved in much less violence and criminal activity. So a very highly educated society that has a lot of leisure time could be beautiful, could be very utopic, creating art, fancy culture, the kinds of elegance that we associate when you get your third PhD. That's what society could be like. Yeah. And I think it would be much more beneficial to be learning how to play guitar in the Bahamas than, driving a truck all day and just barely making ends meet. I mean, we're talking about universal basic income is a comprehensive system. You take away Social Security, you're taking away Medicaid, Medicare, Obamacare. Everything would be folded into this. And then, of course, we'd have a national healthcare system where everything would be folded into this one simple thing that provides all your bare necessities. And from that point on, it's really up to you what you decide to do.
Yeah. Back to your comment about the resources, particularly in the West, our natural resources. Give me the pitch for this platform that satisfies the environmentalist in me. How do we use our resources while still leaving a great national park that we can all go visit?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing to understand is that I have a long history with defending the wildlife, defending the environment at National Geographic, where I worked for 5 years. So I've been very into protecting the environment. I totally believe in human-made global warming. We have been destroying the planet for 20, 30 years, like at an unacceptable pace. But the thing is, reducing our carbon footprint, as the Paris Climate Treaty would have us do, is just not really going to work. You can't tell China, the 1 billion people, and India with nearly 1 billion people to stop developing. We sort of lost that war of reducing our carbon footprint.
Yeah, we just had news this week that we passed 400 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere, too.
You just can't tell a poor Chinese family you don't want to have 2 cars when that's all they've been working for. So, but what you can do is you can take a huge amount of money and put the resources into how to fix the planet using really radical green technologies. I used to work at a wildlife organization as a director called Wild Aid, and we were in Southeast Asia trying to save endangered species, save them from being poached. And we were basically failing, even though there was hundreds of us on the ground trying to stop the tiger from being poached and the Siamese crocodile and all this. Now, it turns out that the best way to probably save endangered species is not in the field protecting them with guns against poachers, but to do it in the laboratory in this Jurassic Park sense, where you can recreate them, reintroduce them to the wild, and reintroduce 5,000 tigers in a single year, more than that, more than they could ever poach. And the idea, and of course, by reintroducing things, you add so much supply that the demand for it also would drop off. So this is the way we solve environmental problems. We solve it through technology. The CRISPR gene editing technology is going to allow us to regrow rainforests at probably 10,000, well, maybe not 10,000, but probably 10 times or 1,000% of the rate we can do right now. We can already grow vegetables basically twice as quick in some circumstances. Yeah. The idea is if we get better and better at using this genetic editing technology, all the rainforests we've cut down, and we have cut down so many of them, we can regrow back really quickly. And the same thing with meatless meat. 1/3 of the arable land on planet Earth is dedicated right now to cattle grazing, to us eating meat. We kill about 150 million animals a day for human consumption, which is, I don't think, I eat a little bit of meat, but I really don't feel good about it. And I like to think that I don't hurt animals, so I don't eat very much of it. the idea is we can do things like meatless meat in the laboratory. There are so many ways to save the environment through technology, and that's really where we need to put our emphasis. And that's how I feel. It's like I completely believe that we've plundered the earth, but I don't think the best way back is to stop industry. The best way back is to turn industry into becoming green machines, where they find radical new technologies to solve this crisis we've created.
We're sort of at a point where we've gone so far in that the only way out is through, right?
No, and I was just writing today about nanotechnologies that can clean rivers. And also different types of like plastic eating bacteria that can eat trash dumps. I write a lot on environmentalism because not only do I love the planet and love, the earth, I realize that the real way to solve it is through different types of energy and different types of radical technology that will literally solve things you couldn't even imagine. And I think that's going to be the best way to save the planet. One day we're going to recreate a perfect utopia. We'll probably have twice the population levels we have now, but we'll have a much more pristine environment because of our ability to recreate that, especially with things like nanotechnology. Once you can reconstitute things at the molecular level, then all those things that we've destroyed, we can bring back. And that's going to be very important when you talk about pristine rainforests. And I guess the biggest problem right now is that we're just killing off so many species. And right now we have no real way to, record a lot of the species that are being destroyed through logging and stuff.
Yeah. Well, hopefully technology will continue to push on ahead. Looks like we got a few minutes left, and I would like to wrap up actually today with a question about art. And I watched today your TEDx presentation about beauty and transhumanism, and one of the things I got out of it really was the humanity part of transhumanism and just the thrill of being alive in the universe and the wonder of it all. And with all this talk about science and technology and STEM education, for myself as a trained musician, I'm on the art side of it, and I don't think STEM should be STEAM because you can't teach art the way you teach other fields. But where do the arts fit into the transhumanist future?
This is a great question, and it's quite tough too because, I've written a bit about art. I don't think I've had any, like with the environment, I can say pretty definitively what I think. Yeah. But with art, it's hard to know because it involves so much creative elements. And I've been faced with this kind of choice with my 5-year-old right now. Is we have a mini grand piano in the house, and I've been actually in a band myself, and I'm a guitarist. I grew up playing the piano, so I actually play the piano and play music at least a few times a week still. The idea is there are all these implants coming, and people are saying, well, probably within 15 or 20 years, you'll be able to implant some kind of chip into your brain and download Mozart's Fifth Symphony or something of that nature. And I actually think that's 100% correct based on how quickly the brainwave technology, is evolving. I mean, just 2 years ago, we really didn't even know about telepathy, and now all of a sudden there are many different things you can buy at just a normal store and get telepathy, brainwave headsets. So the idea of having algorithms and music put into our brains directly through EEG technology or the brainwaves is here. And I've even written an article actually for Vice on how these implants in our heads are going to change the way we interpret music, because music might be something that you no longer ever go to a live concert. It's just the people put on live concerts in their head, and people can tune in, and through the sense of either implants or brainwave headsets and stuff like that, and that's how it goes. Yeah. And they don't need instruments; they can think of stuff in their head. They can think of sounds and shoot it to you. In fact, we already have, there are a few people out there already that have certain types of implants in their heads, and they have different types of issues with how they determine color and sound and this. But all that stuff you can rewire in your brain. And, with the cochlear implants already, with, deafness has sort of been eliminated on planet Earth if you have access to the technology. And the interesting thing about the cochlear implants, the thing that ties into your hearing nerves for deaf people, is that they can hear some high frequency noises, that normal human beings can't. So they're truly transhuman in that sense. They can hear things that like only a dog might be able to hear. That type of high
When
pitch.
I was thinking about this question today, I thought, well, what would my approach be, or how would it change things for me as a composer if I could write sounds into the music that go beyond what is currently normal human hearing? That would be fascinating.
Of course. And just so your listeners know, basically the human hears about one, maybe, some people say 10%, but whatever it is, it's less than 10% of the entire sound spectrum out there in the universe. And so we're talking about different types of things that you can experiment with. It's going to sound so different that we're going to say, are we hearing it? Is it a different sense? That's how weird it's going to get. And some of these people that do this, that already have some of these chips in their heads, what they hear is colors, or they see color. They hear colors. You send color blue, and for them, they able to determine it because it's tied directly into their hearing nerves as opposed to their other types of nerves. And that, of course, there's a number of people that have certain disabilities that are really on the kind of forefront of this technology to figure out how that they can feel, see more, feel more, hear more of the world. And I think, this is very interesting because once you start getting into this, you realize that you can crisscross the senses, and the senses themselves are, and this is what I was saying earlier, I know your listeners might think it's crazy, but in 20, 30 years, some of us may not be eating anymore. Some of us may not, be drinking or breathing air. We find those systems that keep us alive not the best. I mean, it's like I said, it's an incredibly inadequate system that as soon as you stop breathing, you die. You would never, if you were God, or I'm a non-religious person, but if I had all the power, I would never create an entity that was reliant on something like that to live. And when we create machines, of course, we never do that because we create them much stronger than that. So I think as we look at art, we're also going to be looking at all these different things. The light spectrum that we see is also about 1%. And some of the blind people that are now using the robotic eyes have much better telescopic vision already than a normal being. And of course, probably there's about 6 major companies out there working on the robotic eye because a lot of people believe that electively, once you have a better eye than the human eye, people are going to do it. They're going to electively replace at least one of their eyes in order to have that. And they're going to be able to see 5 times further. They're going to be able to stream media directly into their eye, through Wi-Fi, and they're going to be able to. And a robotic eye will be able to detect various gases that might be dangerous, or see a kind of poisonous spider way off in the corner you never would have recognized. There are a huge amount of benefits.
Just in the arts perspective, I read once that I think it was Monet had cataracts and had one of his lenses removed, and his colors got very vivid at the end of his career because he may have been able to see slightly into the UV spectrum. So I can imagine having a cyborg eye that allows me to paint in UV colors that I can experience that I can't now. That would be fascinating.
Of course, and it's also when you're talking about painting, I think one of the things I really find fascinating with the eye is the gases. I mean, everywhere around us, there are all sorts of electrical particles, there are all sorts of electrical phenomena taking place. There's gases. We think you just see, like, I don't know what you're looking at. Maybe you're looking at the screen of your iPad, or I'm in my kid's room. But in my kid's room, there are many, many different things taking place at a molecular level, and even beyond that would be incredibly maybe worthy of art or worthy of discovery or worthy of something scientific. But we don't see that because our eyes are trained to see only about 1% of the light spectrum of the universe. And I think when we talk about art, that's what transhumanism is going to do for us, is it's going to open up our senses and allow us to see truly what the universe is. And I can assure you that, it's going to be like, hundreds and hundreds of times more complex than we ever dreamt. Yeah. And that's going to lead to some amazing art. I think, and that's why I think with the society we could create could just spend, hundreds of years experimenting with these types of things, just a newfound freedom in how we deal with not only art, but how we deal with ourselves and our senses and our psychological perspectives, etc.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. I look forward to being able to paint in ultraviolet colors and use subsonic notes in my music. Well, that's about a half hour. And that's probably a good place to wrap it up. What do you say?
Yeah. Thanks so much for the conversation. It's been great. And I love the art question because I don't have all the answers. I just have a lot of speculation on it.
Yeah.
And it's always fun to think about, I've written a novel, and I also play music, and I've been interested in painting and stuff like that. So it's I'm going to look forward to the kind of some of the things that will happen. And also maybe new art that we'll create that we didn't even know sort of existed yet, different types of ways for us to express ourselves.
Yeah, the exploration and discovery is really something to look forward to. Well, all right, that is a wrap on the interview here. Thank you once again to Zoltan Istvan, the Transhumanist Party presidential candidate. So you can visit transhumanistparty.org to find out more, or zoltanistvan.com to find out more about his campaign. Please do go check that out. And once again, Mr. Istvan, thank you so much for joining me.
I had a great time talking to you. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, and that is your show for this week. Thank you, as always, for listening. Come find us online at panfuture.org. Look for us on Facebook and Twitter. And drop me an email or comment on the show. Let me know what you think. And I will talk to you again in the future.